Nothing that happens can ever be captured resplendent in full spatial and temporal resolution in its entirety by either devices for recording sound and image or by our minds. Even if we could make such documents, they would always be bounded by the physical limits of what can be seen and heard from any one location at any particular time. I've tried to picture the ultimate recording machine, comprised of billions of devices controlling overlapping fields of operation extending in all directions. If these devices were recording continuously, without recourse to the discrete units of the film frame or digital sound sampling, then and only then could we imagine an absolute seamless record of everything that ever happens. However, as I think I've already implied, things simply do not work like this. Take a regular movie camera, registering images at the rate of 24 frames per second. Between frames, for what amounts to half of a second, every second, the shutter is closed. One could imagine something unexpected happening in one of the split seconds when the aperture is shut, like a very brief apparition of some kind, of a ghost, a UFO, an angel even. But this would be lost to us. Stringing one separate thing after the other, as quickly as we can until we reach a semblance of continuity, is all we can do in the end. A kind of faking by necessity, and one which only works if the separate things are only a little different from one another. Too much difference, too large a gap between the adjacent things, and we just end up with flickering confusion. During the first years of the 1960s, my father, a shy man in his early 30s, then employed as a copywriter for Encyclopedia Britannica, decided to realize his own version of the Grand Tour, broken down into fragments and stretched over several annual summer holidays. He was a graduate in modern languages and member of the Linguists Club. The club gave him the occasion to indulge in his love for learning languages, and it seems that every summer he enrolled in a different residential language course, twice to learn German, once for Italian, and another for Spanish. These courses, a combination of language learning, sightseeing, and compulsory get-togethers, must have been an ideal social outlet for my introverted father. This is an attempt at a reconstruction of sorts. I could tell you all the things I am not sure about, but I shan't. Just know that the story is full of gaps. In fact, it is barely a story at all. What I can tell you, though, is that he visited Berlin in the summer of 1960 with a German friend of his. My father met the family of this friend, perhaps the extended family, somewhere in the countryside, and then, on another occasion, just the parents on a trip to what looks very much like Berlin Zoo. And then comes the bit of the story that I know the most about, because it was one of my father's favourite anecdotes. He and his friend went by U-Bahn into East Berlin and surfaced at Frankfurter Tor station on what is now the Karl Marx Allee, but what was, for a short while, the Stalin Allee. The photos are full of things that had only a short span of existence. The statue of Stalin himself and the sports hall outside which my father is posing were put up and pulled down again within a decade or so. Anyway, as one can see, my father and his friend were quite happily taking photos of all that they saw until, according to my father, they were shouted at by an East German soldier for doing so, accused of spying, and threatened with a gun. My father, never admittedly a man drawn to danger, claimed that this was the most terrifying experience of his life. Of course, there is no photo of that moment, only of the ones just before, and try as I might, I can't seem to discern any hint of imminent peril in them. The following year, or perhaps the year after, my father took a trip to Vienna. He never mentioned that he'd been there, or at least I don't remember him doing so. And the temptation, of course, is to analyze each of the photos in this slightly intriguing series of images, looking to piece together a story from fragments of evidence and a great deal of supposition. For instance, one might wonder exactly what was happening at the moment this photograph was taken. What was my father thinking? And why is he the only person at the table smiling for the camera? What is he eating? The black and white doesn't help, and a close-up reveals very little. A slice of buttered bread on the plate and the last part of some potatoes. We can go further and further until we enter the very limits of digital resolution, but nothing helps. Has he made friends with the woman sitting next to him? She also turns up in another photograph from the International Language School, wearing a knowing smile. Or perhaps it's not knowing at all. She's just one of those people who manages to project an inaccurate impression of how they're feeling at any particular time.
You don't need to look so serious, Joanna. It's just another photograph.
So what kind of music do you like then?
Oh, I don't know. A bit of everything, really. Something nice to dance to.
It says here, the institution has its origin in the Imperial Library of the Middle Ages. During the medieval period, the Austrian Duke Albert III, 1349 to 1395, shifted the books of the Viennese vaults into a library. Albert also organised important works from Latin to be translated into German. In the Hofburg, the treasure of Archduke Albert III had been kept in sacristies inside the south tower of the Imperial Chapel. The Archduke was a connoisseur of art. He supported the University of Vienna, and he founded a royal workshop for illustrating manuscripts. The oldest book on record in the library, 1368 Golden Holy Gospels.
Now just walk across. Full of purpose. Tidy English tourists from me.
And maybe one of the gardeners too.